Hello and welcome to Living a Culture of Life podcast by Human Life International. I'm your host, Colleen, and I'm joined today by Florencia Moynihan, the Catholic Nutritionist. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm so excited to have this conversation because you help women with nutrition and fertility coaching. So obviously we're going to be talking all about women's fertility and how women can best support their health and serve their families best. So yeah, I'm super excited.
Me too.
Why don't we start? Can you just give our audience a little background on who you are and what brought you to this mission?
Yes. Oh, thank you for asking that. So my name is Flo. I am the founder of the Catholic Nutritionist. I'm a nutritional therapy practitioner and a certified FEM instructor. So really, it was through my own journey of really struggling with my relationship with food, really struggling with horrible periods from middle school, and never getting answers, and then really struggling with how to eat to feel better, that it wasn't until honestly I learned my cycle and how to eat right that I realized that there's so much that we can do through the way that we live to really restore our bodies to be freed of a lot of symptoms that women have kind of deemed as normal just because they're common. But in reality, our body is made for balance, and there's a lot of things in our modern world that works against that. But when you are well equipped with how to honor it and how to take care of it, you can really find so much freedom.
Oh, exactly. And I don't know, I feel like Instagram brought me to the world of learning about women's health, which is such a weird way to get into it, but I'm so thankful because it's been
Yeah.
so cool to just learn about it, see people's accounts and be like, wow, my body's actually amazing.
Oh, it's incredible. I think so often, yeah, Instagram can be this double-edged sword because same, there were so many things that I only learned because people were telling it on Instagram. And then of course it can kind of just be this information overload, or it can kind of be a vortex sometimes. But a lot of the times in your normal life, I don't know if you ever felt like this, but it feels like between women, the conversation is this, oh yeah, me too. Any symptom that comes, it's me too, or me worse, you feel like that on your period. Well, I pass out. Well, I throw up, whatever it may be. And it becomes kind of this chamber of there's this undertone of my body is so burdensome. Being a woman is so burdensome, when the reality is exactly what you said, that you look at your body and you're like, hang on, this is the coolest thing that God has ever made. And it's so exquisitely designed. When I know how it works, we can grow in so much awe of it.
Yeah. I feel like I went from, oh, my period's coming every month to oh, it's coming, but also this is really cool and I
Yeah.
should be thankful about it.
Yeah. Also, that's kind of cool.
I appreciate it more. So what exactly is a nutritional therapy practitioner?
Yes. Another word that I use for it is holistic nutritionist. But what I think makes nutritional therapy and being an NTP very, very particular, and why I chose that route, was because there's this real big emphasis on a foundational approach, on principle. So there is so much nuance in the health world, yes, but there is principles of how your body is designed to function, what it needs to thrive, and this emphasis on nutrient dense foods. Really, the way that I took it, and this is not the way that the program gives it out, but the way that I took it is this is literally living the way that the Lord made us. Eating the foods that the Lord gave us, living in a way that makes sense for the world that He created for us, living in a way that honors the human person, and really just these principles of mapping out. When we say holistic, when we say whole person approach, what does that mean? And when we say get to the root, I don't know if you ever hear that phrase in more of the holistic or functional space. It's we have to get to the root of your symptoms, get to the root of what is going on. And when you think about, if you were going to make an extraordinary cathedral, it has to start with the foundation. You can only build up as far as you have prepared the ground for it. And so that emphasis on what are the daily things that you need to do, what is and turning something that I think people feel is really complicated and overwhelming, like your body, into something that you can break down and be like, okay, I get it. And now I can live my life with a certain level of skill and understanding.
Yeah, and it's the more that you understand about yourself, the more that you're going to be able to give yourself what you need. And also we're body soul composites. So it's important that you understand your, what you need spiritually, but also what you need physically. And that
Totally.
it's good to be able to honor your body in that way and feed it and give it the nutrition that God intended it for.
100%. I feel obviously in the world, holistic means every system of the body. But when we
Mhm.
think about it from a spiritual perspective, holistic should mean mind, body, soul, exactly what you're saying of that body soul composite. And so if you already have a certain understanding of the beauty of your soul if that's like your entry point, that you're like, no, 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 like I do believe that I was like created by God, created with love, like my soul has meaning and purpose and I'm this internal being, then I think it actually becomes easier to translate it and be like, okay, based off of that, then I should owe a certain amount of care to my physical body as well.
One thing I love like looking at is just like how integrated our spiritual and physical health are. Like,
Yeah.
especially working here, you see women who are like on birth control or who have been like having a lot of casual sex and now have STDs. And you realize that like pursuing this route of like sin also has all these like terrible physical effects. And so, like, on the flip side, when you're actually like living a virtuous life, okay, you're saving sex till marriage, you're not using contraception, you're like also going to reap all these physical benefits. And like, God didn't just give us the like rules only for the soul, but like it's the soul and the body because we're like human.
Oh my gosh, yes. My priest, Father Cole, describes it as like banks to a river. Like
Mm.
we need these river banks, that it's actually what, without that, if we just have water that is like unchanneled, it just becomes stagnant, dirty. There's nothing that good that grows there or lives there. But when we have these river banks, now our river becomes one of the greatest life forces in our entire planet. And so like when we have our Lord's guidance on, hey, I know what is best for you. Like I'm not telling you not to have sex because I don't want you to have fun. It's because I love you. Like you're going to cause yourself so much pain, and my heart just like breaks seeing the amount of pain that women go through when they're kind of stepping outside of those boundaries. But really, it's these riverbanks so that you can live a better life, so that you can have more life, so that you can have a beautiful life, which is, I think, what the heart of every woman really yearns for.
Yeah, exactly. So for you specifically, how do you help women like live in tune with their bodies? What's like your ministry look like?
Okay, love. So the first thing, I actually think every single woman needs to learn how to track her cycle. It is a basic life skill. And it's bonkers that it's not taught like when we're 12. Because I remember learning it. I also genuinely I thought that you had to wait until you were engaged to learn how to track your cycle. I thought it was part of marriage prep. I was like, and I also had this incorrect association that tracking your cycle is NFP.
Mm.
Like it's that is the one thing. And NFP is how to avoid or achieve pregnancy. When really tracking your cycle is a way of monitoring your hormonal health and creating a health record at home for free. Like the best thing that you can do, instead of like always chasing after doctors to give you information, like you can actually be tuning in and reading so much of your body signs and signals that can then be used for the lifestyle and nutrition changes that you want to make. So that's the very first thing in our program that we teach women, is how to track their cycle. Because then, let's say that you are, well, with us, you're going to start making nutrition and lifestyle changes. We're going to start locking some things in. We're going to have an understanding of what your body needs. We're going to do some testing and really make sure that we're answering what your body is asking for. And what's cool is once you know how to track your cycle, you can actually be monitoring that over a few months, and you get to see your body thank you. You get to see your body shift in a positive direction and go, oh my gosh, wait, I'm seeing change. I'm seeing improvement. And then on the other hand, it's also a helpful way of being like, ooh, like this isn't working for me. Something that I think is quite trendy right now is like intermittent fasting, or one meal a day, or the carnivore diet, which I have done all of those. Like, hear me when I say this. I'm only speaking about it because I've lived it. But they might not be the most optimal thing for the feminine body, which requires a lot of safety, requires a lot of nutrients. And so you can actually use your charts to be like, okay, I'm going to try this. I saw this on Instagram. I'm going to test it out. And within a few months, you can kind of start to monitor, okay, is my body thanking me for this? Or are like more pink flags coming up than before? Does it seem like my body like isn't okay with this? So I think that that is a cornerstone of the feminine life. So that is the first place that we begin. And then about like understanding how to nourish the body well, which sounds crazy, but so I mentioned that I had like struggled so much with disordered eating for the majority of my life. Like it really was the hidden war that I was fighting in my brain at all times. And I've spoken to so many women who have either fought the battle or they're still in it right now. And part of that is like there's a disconnect, and this is where my brain started to change, but like I had never looked at food as something to nourish my body to be stronger, which might sound crazy, but it really was just something to control so that I either would get away from the symptoms that I was having, right? I was having like constant stomach aches and stuff like that,
Mhm.
or being something that I could control to just be skinnier, to just be smaller. And so now we kind of rewire it. I call it like going back to the garden and it being like, okay, if we go back to the beginning, if we go back to simplicity, how is your body made? How did God design it? What does it need to thrive? And really taking on this perspective of food as a gift and as a tool, and then knowing how to tune in to what does your body need? Your symptoms that you're having right now, what does that mean that your body is asking for, and knowing how to respond appropriately?
Amen. I've also heard with like the period that it's like your fifth vital sign. So it's like if there's something off there and something abnormal, like that's something that you should definitely get checked out because like there could be something else going on, even if it's just like you're not getting enough food or
Yeah.
you have a blood sugar imbalance or something like that.
100%. Or so often women have this idea of like, well, this is just how it is for the women in my family.
Mm.
Like, we all have excruciating periods. We all have tons and tons of bleeding. Like, this is just how it is. And it might not be. It might be something that this is also like a common phrase is genetics load the gun, but environment pulls the trigger.
Yeah.
So, like, yes, maybe in your family, there's certain predispositions towards things, but you also grew up eating the same food and you like learned how to eat from your mom and from grandma and all that, right? So it's like certain habits also get passed down as well that could be aggravating certain symptoms. And so it's not something to write off if your period is like feeling whacked out. And it's also definitely not something to just accept if maybe a medical provider says like, well, this is just how it is and your only option is birth control. I think respectfully you should get up and walk out of that room because that's not care.
Yeah. No, exactly. And like even if you're not using the birth control for like the birth control like aspect of it, it's still not necessarily going to be helping your like actually get to the root problem that you were talking about.
Yeah. Which I think so many women know. Like I was just at the Seek conference, which was tens of thousands of people and got to speak to so many women and so many of them were like, "Yeah, I'm on birth control and I hate it." But like this was
Mhm.
the only option that I was given for my acne. This was my only option for like not bleeding out every single period or for my excruciating cramps. And so many women are like wrestling, being like, "I don't like this. I'm uncomfortable with it, but this is the one option that I've been given." So I think it's so important to know that if that's the position that you're in, like I have great news for you. You have way, way more options than what is being given you, and so many avenues that can actually help restore your body rather than just being a band aid that turns off certain signals.
Yeah, exactly. It also feels like there's just more empowerment going on in that area. Like people are more aware of the problems with it now than they might have been like 20 years ago.
Oh yeah, I mean the lawsuits themselves kind of get your attention. You know, like it's not even. I think from the medical world that we're getting this, but it's getting to see so many women's stories and experiences. If you go on TikTok, if you go on Instagram and you look up what is happening to gals that are on it, or just so many women that have been on it and they tell me I feel like a shell of myself,
Mhm.
or like my skin got so much worse, I put on so much weight. Like there's just so many experiences. Now, as time goes on, I think there's more and more evidence against this. One of my clients the other day was actually saying, like, I firmly believe, and I agree with her 1,000%, like, birth control has actually put women's health back decades.
Mhm.
It is
Yeah.
not an advancement. It is not a gift and a blessing. And I know that there's so much media and so many women saying that it is, but like, we have to look at the facts. If this
Mhm.
is the one option that's being given to you, and it's this dangerous and has this much risk involved, like that is not women's health.
And not to mention the fact that then if you're married, you have like the moral, like it's immoral to use to like actually control birth, but like it's not fixing the root problem to begin with. And then you're also not able to use it for birth control. Like obviously that's immoral. So like why have this be the only fix? And like to that point of it setting women's health back, if that's the band-aid fix, if that's what everyone goes to, people aren't actually learning about the other ways to fix the problems that it's slapping the band-aid on.
Yeah, that's why I think like what you brought in the beginning, like Instagram and having social media, there's obviously a lot wrong with it. There's obviously a lot of ways that it can be harmful and hurtful, but the grassroots movement of women getting to speak up and like fighting for true education and what is the truth around this is extraordinary to watch. I always say like yeah, there's a lot of difficulty in being a woman in the modern world, like obviously social media and like the impacts that it has on body image and disordered eating. And we have so much birth control that is so accessible, and we live in the era of Planned Parenthood and all of this messaging. But at the same time, I think it has never been a better time to be a woman. Like you have so much available at your fingertips. There's so much opportunity that we have so much to be grateful for, really.
even if it's just women online saying, "Hey, really painful, heavy periods aren't normal."
Yeah.
Like, if this is what your experience has been since you were 12, 13 years old when you first got your period and you didn't know anything other than that, and especially if it runs in your family, you might not know that, like, what you're experiencing every month is like actually a health red flag. And
Yeah.
it's really good that at least like women can hear that and then can go do research on their own in other areas too. Like, I'm not saying find out all your health tips from Instagram, but it can be a good place to start.
Yeah, 100%. Awareness is the first step.
Yeah. How does like stewarding health affect like family life and relationships? Because like this podcast talks a lot about family life and
Mhm.
obviously like the life and family movement. And so obviously fertility we'll get into of how you can help your fertility, but just in general, how does making sure your body has the nutrients it needs like affect the way that moms relate to their kids or to their husbands or single people relate to their friends?
Oh my gosh, such a good question. So many layers. I think one thing that women need to recognize and like don't I don't think a lot of moms realize how much of the heart of their home they are. And like when mom is good, things change. When mom is not good, a lot of things are impacted by that. And I think a lot of women walk around with maybe the fear or the guilt that them taking care of themselves intentionally, like in either investing money or time or energy into getting their health on track, is taking away from someone else. Like there's this idea that me investing that time is taking away from time that could be given to my children. Me investing this money in me getting this help is taking away from other money that could be used for some other need that my child or my family has. And I think it's so, so important to understand that there's this incredible and beautiful trickle down effect that happens. And like your children will thank you. Like your children will thank you when you are well taken care of, when they get to grow up and see like the effort that you put in and the time that you put in to be better. I'm thinking about one client who like she was like, "You know what? My sons, they have a lot of needs. There's a lot going on here right now, but the answer isn't to get them more help. The answer isn't to like, okay, I'm going to pour more resources into this son that has this diagnosis right now." But she realized like actually I need to be the mom that can love him and take care of him. And for her burnout, her PMS was getting in the way of that. And so she like even came back a couple months later and she was like, "He looked at me and told me that I'm such a happy mom." Like he wouldn't have said that to me, you know? Like she was like, "I used to have a 1-inch fuse." Like he wouldn't have been able to say that. And now, because of the way that she takes care of herself and the way that she's like understood what her body needs, she's getting to see like her sons have the best version of her that she can have. So I think that's one thing of knowing that like you investing in yourself and taking care of your body isn't selfish. It's actually one of the most generous things that you can do. And alongside that, in terms of like spouses, or maybe if you're just like looking forward and you really dream of having a family one day, the understanding of preconception preparation, that you can only give what you have.
Mhm.
So, building up your nutritional wealth. And I think that this is something that is so critical, especially if you are passionate about the pro life movement. Like, we have to start caring about our babies before they even exist. Because the reality is, and studies have shown this, is that if we start like making dietary changes or we start like micronutrient supplementation once mom is pregnant, the impact on the child's life, like their lifelong health, is actually quite minimal. Why? Because the ball's already rolling, right? Some of the most important parts of baby's body that will set up what their life is like have developed sometimes before you even realize that you're pregnant. And so the critical factor of you beginning to take care of your body is actually one of the greatest gifts that you can give for generations. Like your health is impacted not just by your mom and dad's health, but by your grandma and granddad's health. Like we pass so much down along the family. So, really understanding that the choices that you make now, whether you are super single or maybe you're only engaged or you're just starting to get married and like you guys are talking about having a family, or maybe you've had some kids, now you're opening up the conversation about having another, this understanding of you are the, especially mom, you are the one that is going to give the building blocks to baby to build their bones, their nervous system, their every single dendrite that goes through their sweet little brain, like every single piece of tissue comes from mom, and dad actually plays more of a role than we've ever even realized. They're starting to even think that dads health can actually have more of like a 60% impact rather than like a 50-50. And even the understanding of like dad's sperm health will impact how much morning sickness mom has, her chances of preeclampsia, like things like that, that you're like, ooh, that, I want to have a happy pregnancy, right? So the understanding that taking care of your health is critical to your family life and to people that you might never even get to meet. I think that that's the coolest thing. It's having this generosity and having this almost like transcendent view of like what I do now isn't just for me. And it's not just about me, but like the good that I do now will multiply exponentially. And then the ways where I'm slothful, the ways where I am careless, the ways where I maybe lack, I'll be so real, lack the virtue or kind of don't prioritize the things that need to be prioritized, it will also exponentially impact down the road.
Interesting. Yeah, I think it's very easy to forget how much like the mother's health affects, especially like before you're pregnant, actually affects like your children.
Yeah.
What like practical things could women, be they single or married or engaged, who like hope to have children down the road? What are some practical things they can do to support their health now?
Love. Okay, start tracking your cycle now because you're not going to regret that. Second is before, I know that I'm kind of breezing through things that are actually really big topics, and I don't want it to feel like I'm saying it lightly. Like these things are actually really, really serious. And even when I bring up like your relationship with food, when I bring up saying like, yeah, seeing your food to nourish, like for some women, hearing that is like a punch to the gut. There's like this, well, that is not where I am and I'm not even in close. And so I just want to reverence that and say that like if that's where you are, like one, the Lord is already there with you. Like you are absolutely not alone in this. And if even listening to this conversation or there's been stirrings in your heart or something's been coming back up of you being like, man, I think that the way that I'm living isn't right, or like I'm exhausted by the thought of food, or I'm like constantly at war with my own body. I just want you to know that like the Lord is with you where you are, and you actually know more than you realize. So as you listen to this conversation, if there's like one thing that is coming up that you're like, okay, this is reminding me, that maybe I do need to talk to someone about my relationship with food, and like maybe this isn't normal what I'm experiencing, or like I've had this pull that I like should get off of the birth control even though it's not for sex purposes, it's only for my acne. Like starting with what is stirring in your heart, I would say, is the first thing. And then the second thing is like maybe can you go journal it out, like the thing that is coming up right now, can you go journal about it? If you are Catholic, go take it to the chapel. If not, sit in your room, quiet place, light a candle, whatever it may be, and really sit and think, okay, Lord, where are you in this? What do you have to say? What would it look like for me to like go back to the garden? Because I think so often we want to jump into, well, what do I do? What do I do? How do I fix it? When your heart and your mind are the critical first step. For any of this to work, if you want to optimize your health, if you want to have balanced hormones, if you want to have clear, radiant skin, if you want to get pregnant in 2025, like all of these amazing things that I help women do, like I get it, and these are the goals that you have, you can't ignore what is going on in your heart and your mind first. And then the next thing I would say is like learning to live in balance. So what I mean by that is so many women are like so good at living in extremes.
Mhm.
Like it's either like I'm doing full whole 30 and I have all these rules and I'm cutting this out and this and that, and I'm going to the gym 5 days a week and I'm doing an hour of cardio, or swinging to the other extreme of like I'm doing nothing. I forget to eat all day and then I heat up a lean cuisine, or like I'm going to Taco Bell, something like that. There's like these extremes. So really finding like a moderate point. So for pretty much everyone, are you walking daily? That's great. Like moving your body every single day. Are you lifting things that are heavy so that you can get stronger? Are you strength training like 3 days a week? That is something that is so good for you, so good for your hormones, so good for your blood sugar, so good for your future family, right? And so good for like, when I say future family, I don't even mean like you having kids. Yes. But think like even further than that. Like the impact that it has on your family when you are 80 years old and you can walk up the stairs by yourself.
Yeah.
Like when you can get up out of a chair on your own. Like, if you think that that doesn't impact your family, you haven't been around enough elderly people. You know, like, we have to pay attention to those things, and I've watched both sides. I've seen the impact of what it's like for someone to be in a wheelchair for the last 15 years of their life, and then I've also seen the impact of someone who's 90 years old and can still move around and be active, and how their mind is, and being able to recognize their family's faces. Like, that is the way to think about exercise, especially if you have struggled with your relationship with food, or exercise has always been a punishment for your body or something that you dread. Thinking about it in those terms of like, wait, what does it mean if right now, as a 18, 25, 45-year-old, I work out to take care of myself? What's like the long-term impact of that? And then maybe a food point to start. This might seem obvious, but I think not enough women are eating breakfast. And when I say breakfast, I don't mean coffee and a cereal bar or an RX bar. I don't mean an acai bowl. When I say breakfast, I mean a protein rich, animal protein, savory breakfast. So you can really anchor down your blood sugar for the day, that you can feel steady and satiated and have the energy, refuel after a long night of fasting. And then the third thing would be, are you sleeping? So often that is like the first thing to go, which if you are a young mom, hear my heart, you are in a season and God bless you for it. So right now sleep might be a little bit harder to come by, but do what you can and stay away from your phone so that the sleep that you do get is important and good for you. And then if that's not the season that you're in and you do have a say in when you sleep and how long you sleep, that is one of the greatest ways that you can thank God for the body that he has given you, because it is essential to every single system in your body repairing, and to your quality of life and the quality of your health over the coming decades. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, those are like super helpful, like just tips of like getting your health in order and like being able to like completely steward your body. And the sleep one is like an amazing reminder because that's like always the first thing that goes out the window for me.
I know. And it's, I think so often we're like used to getting by on less and less and less.
Mhm.
But once you realize how much your rates of like Alzheimer's go up, how many pounds you're going to gain every year that you sleep less than 6 hours, how low your cognition is, how much it affects your mood, like so many of the problems that we see in our practice, I wonder how much of it is like just a lack of sleep.
Is there like, I know people always say 8 hours of sleep. Is that like the optimal time for like amount of sleep if you're able to do that?
Yeah, women actually might need a little bit more.
Okay.
And it's not just the amount of time that you sleep, because you could sleep 8 hours from 1 a.m. to 9 a.m. And
Mhm.
that is not the same as you sleeping from whatever, 9 to 6. So it's not just the amount of time that you are sleeping, but it is one, how deeply you are sleeping. So is your room set up in an environment that helps with optimal sleep? Typically, that's having a cooler room, that's making sure that it's so dark that you can't see your hand in front of you, so that your body is really able to get into that optimal melatonin production. And then the time that you're sleeping, because really, if you are not asleep at certain times, your body is meant to work like clockwork. That's what your circadian rhythm is that it's designed to work like clockwork and have certain functions at certain times. And so if you are not asleep at that time, like certain functions might not happen. So it's not just the amount of time you sleep, but when you are sleeping and how deeply you're sleeping.
That's good to know. um, I want to talk a little bit about fertility specifically, just because obviously on this podcast we talk a lot about birth control and contraception and the problems with that. And I kind of wanted to do the like other side of that, which is like, hey, how can you actually like support your fertility if you're someone who's like either never gone down the birth control route or you already know it's like not good for you and you're getting off of it and you're trying to like support your fertility. So like I guess just a great place to start is like, what do you find? Like, what's your favorite like fun fact about a woman's like menstrual cycle? Like, what is something that's like really interesting or like really cool to you?
Okay, you want to know what's so funny? The first thing that pops into my head, I'll say something else, but my sincere response to that question was that your fallopian tube is the size of the spaghetti noodle, and I think that that's the cutest thing I've ever heard in my entire life. Like, it's just so cute, and how your fallopian tube and your ovaries aren't actually connected. There's just like space in between them, and so when an egg is ovulated, it just like gets sent in. to the little noodle. I think that that's precious. But one thing that I love is this. I call it the 100-day effect.
Okay.
So with you, so you have your ovaries and all of
Mhm.
the eggs inside of it. If you are ovulating, if you have a regular menstrual ovulatory cycle every single month, you're releasing an egg a month.
Mhm.
And so each month, a few different eggs get recruited, and then eventually one will become the dominant egg, grow, and that's the one that becomes ovulated that cycle.
Okay.
But the process from when it is like recruited, kind of like that the top 10 of like who's it going to be, who's going to be the winner, to it being the egg that is released is about 100 days. So when you have this period, this cycle right now, you can think back over the past 100 days of what environment was this egg kind of like raised in, right? What did my life look like over the course of the past 100 days? And the reason I think that that is so cool is because it shows that for women, we play the long game. And one thing that I always tell my clients is if it's not slow, it's not human. Like so much of the health and fertility world might make you feel like 30-day fix. Focus on this right now. Or women might struggle to keep up with something for more than 2 weeks, 30 days, stuff like that. But when you really think, okay, 100 days at a time. So the effort that I'm putting into preparing my body for pregnancy, I like to say to have, if you can have 3 years, that would be incredible. If you can focus intentionally for at least 6 months for both husband and wife, that would be ideal too. But really thinking about like over the course of 100 days. So what you get to see, and this is where my clients sometimes will be like, oh my gosh, this period was so much easier. And they think, well, the last 100 days, the last 3 months, like I've been putting so much effort into X, Y, and Z. Or they're like, ooh, girl, I like fell off a little bit, or travel, the holidays were like really big deal. And I can like feel it. So I think that idea of like your body working in 100-day cycles is so fascinating.
Yeah, and it also just like I don't know, it's just like so cool how the things that you're doing like now, like you're not necessarily going to see the fruit of it for so long, but that's a little bit more, I guess, encouragement to just kind of keep going and like slowly just like work on building yourself and not feel like rushed to fix yourself all at once. Like I feel like it's a
Yeah.
little easier to have forgiveness with yourself where you're like, okay, this is I'm in it for the long haul, not for
Yeah.
like that quick fix immediately.
It's permission to not judge too soon. It's
Mhm.
permission to be like, well, I've been working so hard on this month. Why is it not working? Now you can be like, no, no, no. I knew this. Like, I know that I have to give myself time for my body to respond and to show me the changes that it's making.
What are some this was like I went around and polled like all the girls that work in the office here today before the podcast and I was like, "What do you want to hear about?" And
Fun.
one of the questions I got was, "What are the warning signs of a hormonal imbalance?" Like, if you have girls that are listening to it, be they married or single, and they're just like, what are some things that they should make the little like red flag, like the little like go off and say, "This is a red flag for your health."
Yeah. When you say hormonal imbalance, do you mean like reproductive, like
Yeah.
cycle things, or just like hormones in general?
Well, cycle things and then I guess like your hormones in general are connected to that. So if there's
Yeah.
anything else that's not specifically cycle related that's like tied into this, obviously
Okay.
that as well.
Love it. Such a good question. Okay. So cycle things. I'm choosing my words carefully because I don't want you to listen and freak out if you see these things. But they're pink flags. It's worth keeping an eye on, and it's better for you to know than to not know. So, one would be if you are having PMS or period symptoms that are disrupting your quality of life. That is already a red flag. If you have to call out, if your mood drops so much that you literally feel like it affects your relationships, if you have like really bad breakouts, maybe during your period or during ovulation, any like big signs that you see throughout your cycle, that would be one. Another would be brown spotting, actually, at
Okay.
the end of your cycle or at the end of your period. If you're seeing a lot of brown bleeding consistently month after month after month, we might want to consider looking into progesterone, like your progesterone levels and what is going on there. That would be another one. Cycles that are too short, so less than like 24 days, we start to wonder what's going on there. If they're longer consistently than like 30, 36, 37 days, we also start to wonder what's going on there. And bleeding too much or bleeding not enough. So those would be some period red flags. Of too much would be more, oh, I can't remember the millimeters right now, milliliters. But if you are like, I am changing my pad or tampon every hour,
Mhm.
or even every 2 or 3 hours, I would argue, for multiple days of your period, something's up there. Or if you feel like you never need more than like one pad or tampon throughout the day, or even a liner, or it's very, very light pink, these are all things worth looking at. Which, if you hear this and you're like, "Oh, just shoot me an email, okay? Just shoot me an email. We'll get you sorted, but it's better for you to know." And then in terms of other hormonal things, I would say if you are gaining a lot of weight without changing anything, if you are always exhausted, if you feel like you're 25 going on 85, if you acne is another big one. It's a great way for your body to get your attention and to ask you for help. Those would be some of the big ones, but like any kind of extreme like fatigue, that's not normal. If you're noticing a lot of weight gain in a short time frame where you feel like not a lot of things are changing, there could be something going on there. Acne, hair falling out, a lot of things.
It's funny as you were saying that, it just like struck me how funny it is that acne is one of the big ones. Like, of course, God creating women was like, well, if I affect their face, then they're gonna like know that something's going on. Like,
Oh, Colleen, you were the first person that has said it that way. You're so right. He builds so many mechanisms in, and I think person to person, like there's such particular ways that he has like wired your body to get your attention. For me, instantaneously, it's gonna be my stomach. Like if something is off, I'm gonna have my stomach aches again. Or if I'm like really anxious, like it is like my body communicates with me and it gets my attention through my gut. For other women, it's like their acne or their eczema. There's so many ways, and you have to think about like, well, duh. And that's where it's like your symptoms are your friends. Like your symptoms are not things that are like your body's just totally chaotic and working against you, but really it's your body's only way of communicating with you and with getting your attention, so it's worth listening to.
yeah. Have you ever heard, like, I've heard that there's like this trend of eating or exercising like in sync with your cycle. Is that something that like is actually effective, or is that just kind of like a health fad?
I don't think it's a health fad. No. The one, yes. So you can, based off of the phases of your cycle, so where you are at in the hormonal cycle, what hormones are dominant, you can shift the way that you eat. I think that the most important thing to know is before you even like shift the food and the exercise is understanding what you will feel like, what typically you will feel like throughout each of these. I call them seasons in your cycle. Because then you go, oh my gosh, I'm not crazy. Like, of course, I have like so much energy and I feel like $1,000,000 in my ovulatory window. And then like a week later, I'm like, nobody talked to me. I want to be home. And like, or maybe if you have ADHD, this is also where your dopamine has a really, really hard time. So like that's I think something that isn't talked about enough is like how women struggle with ADHD and how that can impact their cycle. So or how their cycle impacts their ADHD symptoms. But so you can shift the way that you eat and the way that you exercise. It's definitely not a fad. And anecdotally, like so many women have found it so, so, so helpful. I do like to know, for example, you're going to be more carb sensitive, insulin sensitive in the first half of your cycle compared to the second half. So I'm a little bit more intentional with what I eat and how I eat, knowing that. Your caloric needs go up a little bit the second half of your cycle. And the second half of your cycle, like in your luteal phase before your period, this is probably where you're like, all I want is to eat chips and cookies and stuff like that. So you have to be more intentional with increasing your protein there. And then you can also play around with like more fiber so you can help your body move the extra estrogen through your system when you're in that high estrogen phase. The one thing with the exercise that I think is just worth noting is that if you are a little bit too extreme with cycle syncing, you might end up under training. So, what I mean by that is that if you completely take off the week of your period and the week before your period to just do walking or Pilates or stretching, you might run the risk of under training your muscles throughout the whole month. And for women, your muscle mass is so, so critical, especially as you head into your 30s, 40s, and 50s. So that would be like that's my one caveat with cycle syncing is that I don't want women to like go too soft for half of the month and not lift heavy things. Because that's just not going to be as helpful. But it's definitely not just a fad.
Okay. Yeah, it's definitely something that I've heard about, and I'm like, that sounds cool, but I've never like delved into that area of like women's health. Um, how can women, I guess we kind of talked about this a little bit, but like women who are pregnant, what are some things that they can do to like help support their bodies, especially at a point where you can't lift as much? Or
Oh
like,
yeah.
I mean, I guess that's probably the point where you're going to an OBGYN who's probably telling you what vitamins to take, but still.
Yeah. So I would say in that first trimester, if you are struggling with a lot of morning sickness, it's okay that you're not going to eat things perfectly. So I want you to like not have a ton of guilt, but you can still have some strategy that can actually help with that nausea. So having smaller, more consistent meals. I I have my clients like if they really struggle, keep a cooler next to their bed with like some string cheese, maybe a protein shake, a tangerine, like having things easily accessible to them because they typically find if they eat right before they start really moving, it really does help curb that. The second thing is I know a lot of the times meat is a massive aversion in your first trimester. And when you're nauseous, like no one likes a steak or chicken when they're nauseous, let's be honest. But you balancing your blood sugar will have a critical impact on your nausea throughout the day. So always pairing a protein and a carb. And I think you can get kind of sneaky with some of your proteins if the thought of like chicken and meat is throwing you off. A good protein powder, my favorite is Pro Mix, having Greek yogurt, having cottage cheese things, having some way that you're getting some kind of protein in there with your carb. Then, as you go throughout your second and third trimester, a lot of your nutrient needs are increasing. And your needs are increasing because baby needs more, while your capacity and your space is like decreasing. So, again, those smaller meals can be really helpful, making sure that you're hydrating really well. This is also where you might find that you're craving a lot of fruit, balance it out with protein. And then in terms of movement, walking every single day. And then you do not need to be lifting heavy, but some kind of training, especially with mobility, will actually help
Mhm.
birth be easier for you.
That's super cool. I
Oh,
love
wait,
learning about this.
can I add
Yeah.
one more thought? The 4th trimester? So that
Mhm.
4th trimester, after you give birth, um, if you wanna book, my best recommendation will be the first 40 days, but it is so critical. We've kind of lost the art of the 4th trimester in America, in it
Mhm.
being a season where mom is supposed to rest and be replenished. That is it. Mom hugging baby, feeding baby, resting, and really replenishing and recovering. So, if you can have a meal prep party and have your friends and your family come over and stock up your freezer with nutrient dense, nourishing, hot meals, that'll be really helpful. I want you to stay away from salads that first month. You don't want things that are cold, you want things that are hot so we can help with that circulation, which is kind of more of a traditional Chinese medicine approach. Lots of teas, lots of broths, lots of stews, and really making sure that you kind of do your best. I pray that you have the support that you need. And if you do, really taking advantage of it. And if you don't, do your best to prepare beforehand so that you can have food on hand that you'll need throughout the days and as much rest as possible.
Yeah. No, that's super, like, great advice. It's funny because one of my friends, the last time she was pregnant, she was like, "So I heard about this baby shower idea
Yeah.
where everyone comes over and they clean the house for the mom." And
So good.
and it just
So
like occurred
good.
to me, you could totally do that with meal prep too, where it's like,
Yeah.
okay, this is my like third baby and I have all the baby clothes I need. I have the crib, but like if you guys want to come over and like clean my house and make me
Yeah.
food, this is like perfect.
And if the thought of asking that makes you shudder, that's a gut check, and you should totally do it. Like, you should press up against that resistance. I see so many moms that are like, "Oh, I couldn't ask that," or "That's like being a burden," or "That's being so annoying." Like, let's be so real. People love being asked for help. People love being needed. Like I am so sure that if you have good friends and family in your life, I hope that you do, that they would be so excited to take you up on that. And if they're offering those kinds of things, like don't get in your own way and be like, no, I can do it on my own. But really like allow the village to build up around you. And it'll help because it can be a tough season, especially for first time moms. It's a big adjustment, and so really taking advantage of it and being like, you know what, I'm not a burden, my baby's not a burden, I need help.
Exactly. And that seems to like kind of circle back to what we were saying at the beginning, where we were talking about how like women tend to like be like, oh, well, I need to prioritize the needs of my family over myself, and having the humility to recognize that like, no, you don't have to do it all. Like, and traditionally, from my understanding, it's like women usually had like the sister who lived at home or they lived in a house where their mother was also there. There was just more of a community around them because they didn't move out of their hometown than a lot of women do these days. So like it's okay to rely on community support.
Oh my gosh, essential. Yeah, you're so right.
Yeah. Okay. I've got a couple more questions. The first one is, how does your physical health impact your spiritual health?
Oh,
Which is like a big topic, but just
I
like,
love it. I love it. I love it. Okay, one, do you believe that God cares about your body? Do you believe that he cares about your healing? Do you believe that he like wants you to be well? Because if you don't, that alone is showing some like gaps in your understanding of the Father. And I am not saying God wants every single person to be 100% healthy and everything that you ask for. Well, I do think he wants to be healthy, but as in like no one will suffer. Like and there shouldn't be any kind of disease or sickness. Like we live in a fallen world. This is part of the reality, and sometimes the Lord does allow great sufferings, but for great redemptions. But like, do you believe that he cares? I think that that's something that has come up a lot lately, that I see women, it becomes this roadblock to them even seeking out healing, because they're like, well, I don't, does he care if I'm better? You know, like taking on these physical sufferings of the symptoms that we were kind of talking about earlier as essential, when it's like, well, maybe these are actually avenues and invitations that you can kind of get to know him better and change your life. And then also, I do think that there's something to be said for like, to be physically healthy, especially in today's modern world, you have to do hard things. You like have to make choices. You have to grow in so much discipline. It is like pretty easy to go on a 20-minute walk, but it's also easier not to. It's pretty darn easy to like go through and cook your proteins up for the week, have some carbs, have some fiber. It's also easier to order DoorDash. Like there's so many opportunities for virtue in taking care of your physical body that do translate to the spiritual life, because it's easy to go to mass in the morning, but it's also easier not to. So
Mhm.
I do think that there's a good amount of discipline that you can learn. I don't think it's automatically virtuous to take care of your health, because if that were true, every single NBA player would be a saint, you know? But
Mhm.
there is something to be said for you having to kind of discipline your mind and your body, fight against temptations, and to choose the greater good, which oftentimes is challenging. And that alone, that for like the spiritual benefits alone. And then I do think that there's a certain sense of like littleness and of dependence on the Lord that we get to learn as we take care of our bodies, because like the more you tune in, the more you realize you are so small. Like the more you get to like learn your body signs and symptoms and what it needs, the more you realize like, oh my gosh, I cannot be self-reliant. Like I can't just sustain myself. Like you designed me to need so much sleep and like to need to eat every few hours. Like that's crazy. You know, if like the Lord wanted you to photosynthesize, he would have done that, but he didn't. So the all of those like needs that your body has are reminders that the Lord has, one, designed you, you've been carefully crafted, but also two, that like you are allowed to be little, and like we are supposed to be like, I actually just finished the Fruit of Her Womb consecration by Father Boniface Hicks. Have you heard that one?
No, I haven't.
Oh, Colleen, you would love it, because literally all he asks you the whole month and the invitation is to be a child in the womb of Mary. And like that's what the way that the consecration goes. It's incredibly impactful. But when you realize that you're like, well, I'm I'm in the womb of our Blessed Mother, and you're a twin. You're a twin with Jesus in the womb. And so you're pressed up to our Lord as close as you can, and you're this infant that's totally dependent and totally reliant on its mother, and like we're totally reliant on our Lord. So I think the more that we learn about our bodies, I think a lot of people have a fear that it'll become an idolatry,
Mm.
and that like if I start taking care of my health, I'm going to become obsessive. But I sincerely think if you go about it the right way, like you will learn so much about yourself, and it just reflects back the heart of the Father and how much we need him.
Well, and it's like working out. Like if you have like your spiritual life and your physical life, and if you're working out one leg and you're not working out the other, like there's going to be an imbalance. So just
Yeah.
like recognizing that like the two are integrated, and even just like from just like what we think of as the spiritual life, which is like, going to mass or going to adoration or praying.
Mhm.
If you're falling asleep because you can't stay awake because like you didn't get enough sleep the night before, or you like can't focus because your brain's going everywhere because you're not giving it enough food, like that's going to affect, like they're going to affect each other in that way too.
So good. Such a good example.
And then I just wanted to, we mentioned earlier how like male fertility affects like healthy pregnancies. Do you have any tips for like women who are listening who are like, I need to help, I want to help my husband? Like, have you ever studied the like male side of it? And do you have any tips for them who are like, they can be like, hey, dear, you should
Yeah.
do
Yeah, yeah,
this?
yeah. Okay, honestly, one, you need to get him to stop putting his phone in his pocket. That is a huge one. Your phone is emitting such massive amounts of radiation. It's like putting a Wi Fi router in your pocket, and his sperm is getting super affected by that. A second thing that we found is that polyester briefs are almost as effective as contraception in dropping that sperm rate. So, that sperm count. So, if you love your husband and you guys are hoping to have lots and lots of babies, go ahead and switch out for cotton briefs. You would not believe it is crazy the impact that that has. Getting the phone out of the pocket and then making sure that he's moving, that he's exercising regularly. That is so, so important. And that he's eating right too. I think a lot of the times, especially when women are on a fertility journey, a lot of the times it feels like the women are taking the brunt of it and the man is just kind of along for the ride. So men, men love to know why something needs to happen. Like when they have the purpose, they are so good at being like, okay, and they'll become more intense about it than you will. So if you can kind of explain to him that he actually has a major role in not just how easily you guys will get pregnant, but the how well that pregnancy will be sustained, how you will feel during that pregnancy and the life of your child, that protector in him will completely step up. And if he hasn't been eating right, if he hasn't been sleeping enough, if he hasn't been working out, I think that'll kind of be a good call to action for him. So those would be some of the first ones, but the easiest ones is being like, babe, get your phone out. I see so many wet men put their phone in their front pocket. If you're gonna put it in your front pocket, put it on airplane mode first. No one needs you for those like 30 seconds that it's in there.
Well, Flo, this has been a great conversation. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Like, I've loved every minute of this. I'm such a nerd about this stuff. And thank you.
Thank you for asking such phenomenal questions. This has been such a pleasure.
Thank you. You're welcome. And to all of our listeners, oh, actually, one last question before we close up. Where can people find you?
Oh, yes. On Instagram at the Catholic Nutritionist. My website, thecatholicnutritionist.com. I also have a podcast available on Apple and Spotify called Made Good. And I have some new programs and courses coming out this year, but those are the main three places.
Perfect. Well, I'll also link them in the description below so people can go find them there. So, yeah. And to all of our listeners, please like, subscribe, let us know any questions you have in the comments, and keep on living the culture of life. God bless.